All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello, all from the East Coast to West Coast. Welcome. This has been an eventful weekend and an eventful Monday as we greet you from the United States of America. America has embarked on something that has the foolhardiness and shallowness of an administration that is filled with people who are utter incompetence and only care about sending a message to you of American strength. And so articulated goals in this country are almost worthless because they conceal a lot of reality. And I'd suggest to you respectfully, and I love my country, and that's really why I can speak about my country this way, that what we're living now is the fruits of an American populace that was sucked in some way, got drunk on the idea of a strong man who could stare down the rest of the world and somehow make America better. And they accepted the empty promises of a con man, a failed real estate developer who declared bankruptcy 4 times, even in business, a guy who didn't distinguish himself in any extraordinary way, a New York playboy who built an empire of branding with his name and who was vaulted to where we see him now by a history that was varnished over in a television show that was so popular and so well done that it literally reconstituted the image of someone who was a failed executive and really a swamp real estate salesman. Trump University was found to be such a fraud that they paid a $25 million penalty. Trump charities were shown to be such a fraud that they are barred from doing business as charities in the state of New York. What does that have to do with anything? I just want to explain to all our friends across the globe what America is led by now. People who perform and act the theater of government, but are really involved in the self-aggrandizement and the corruption open to those in power. And that has a lot to do with what is happening in Iran and in the Middle East now. Sorry to come on so heavy. To me, a war like this is a really important thing and a really heavy thing. The Last Angry Manny asks, question for all, has the U.S. officially declared war via an unprovoked attack on Iran? Well, we'll get to that. And thank you for the super chat and super stickers just to do business first. It is great to have everybody in the chat. We're a live chat, and you can join the chat. Super stickers, super chats are available. Wes in Florida with a $5 super chat says, Trump may be distracting from Epstein, but if confronting Iran helps the oppressed, does the outcome matter? Or am I out of my mind? Hashtag women's rights. Well, it's true what's implied in that question. The truth is the complexities of Iran and the complexities that go along with intervention in Iran are real. You had Iranian leadership, which is clearly, to all looking, horrible, oppressive, despotic, cruel, brutal, killing many of their own people for decades now, the kind of oppression that in no way reflected a will of the people. the question became how to deal with it. What you have in Iran, and I'll play you a cut in a little while because there are a couple of scholars who I thought said some things that were noteworthy and worth relating and sharing with you. You had in Iran, and you have in Iran, a rich country, meaning rich intellectually. They are a secular nation in many ways beyond this crazy religious leadership that they have, extreme leadership. And so in that sense, you had a country longing for, if not a democracy, some kind of leadership that better reflected that population. This, though, is in typical Trumpian fashion, all boom and no plan. A guy who is still on the crack high from Venezuela, thinking that he can move in with American might and do what he did in Venezuela, getting out with no casualties, minimal casualties, and taking a victory lap at reforming the Middle East, having gotten rid of this despotic regime that all agree is awful. Yes, the Israelis and the Americans led this. But what was really underpinning a bunch of it was other interests in the Middle East from MBS. I don't know if you saw the reporting. It's been good. MBS called Donald Trump 4 times to say now is the time to strike. Iran is weakened but getting stronger. Saudis have tremendous interest in what America is doing now. The Emiratis have tremendous interest in what America is doing now. The Gulf nations support what is happening with American leadership in this war effort. Now, they may grow to regret it. They may already regret it. But it's not just the Israelis. And that's important because Trump was pushed over the finish line, I think, by people like MBS and others. He surrounded himself with yes men who say, that's right, sir. Yep, we're going to go in there. We'll take care of them with American might, with American power, with American lethality. Pete Hegseth loves to say lethality, warriors. In fact, start me with Pete Hegseth, if you would. Here's Hegseth in remarks about what's going on.
Hold our country without hesitation. We are not defenders anymore. We are warriors, trained to kill the enemy and break their will. History is watching. Be the force you swore an oath to be: focused, disciplined, lethal, and unbreakable. We will finish this on America First conditions of President Trump's choosing. Nobody else's, as it should be. And know this above all: President Trump and I have your back, always. Through fire, through criticism, through fake news, through everything. We unleash you because you are the best, most powerful, most lethal fighting force the world has ever seen.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that right now. The lethality, the warriors, we're the greatest, let me show you. And the rhetoric of war, the rhetoric of strength is what these guys really like to do, the theater of it. Beth Farmer with a $20 super chat saying, sounds like this war will be another long failed one. And indeed, the history of America in these flexes is a sad one and a lengthy one. Afghanistan, Libya, it's Iraq, of course, Vietnam going back. In terms of nuclear capability, isn't North Korea more of a threat to the U.S. than Iran, says Tony Ladowdy. Of course. Thanks for the $5 super chat. Yeah. But they have nukes already, which is why everybody wants nukes. Keeps countries like America and the West off your back. Here is Donald Trump speaking a little bit about what is going on in Iran and has happened over the weekend.
Today, the United States military continues to carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran to eliminate the grave threats posed to America by this terrible terrorist regime. Following our obliteration of Iran's nuclear program in Operation Midnight Hammer a short while ago, we warned Iran not to make any attempt to rebuild at a different location because they were unable to use the ones that we so powerfully blew up. But they ignored those warnings and refused to cease their pursuit of nuclear weapons. In addition, the regime's conventional ballistic missile program was growing rapidly and dramatically, and this posed a very clear, colossal threat to America and our forces stationed overseas. The regime already had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases, both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. The purpose of this fast-growing missile program was to shield their nuclear weapon development and make it extraordinarily difficult for anyone to stop them from making these highly forbidden by us nuclear weapons. We were the ones that were complaining. We were the ones that wanted it stopped, but everybody was behind us. They just didn't have the courage to say so. An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat to the Middle East, but also to the American people. Our country itself would be under threat, and it was very nearly under threat. I was very proud to have knocked out the Iran nuclear deal by President Barack Hussein Obama. That was a horrible, horrible, dangerous document. They would have had nuclear weapons 3 years ago, and they would have used them. But I'll not let that happen. For almost 46.
Okay, thank you. This is a fact that I've made clear to everybody before. Donald Trump couldn't tell you anything in the last Iran nuclear deal that he is peacocking about having torn up, the one made by Obama. Couldn't tell you one thing about it, except for the fact that it was made during Obama's administration. Now, if they were sincere at all, even for a moment, about trying to get a nuclear deal, they would have happily taken that same deal and just put Trump's name on it. There was reporting that this was essentially in the works from the 28th of January, and that the idea somehow that they were working toward avoiding war was simply a distraction from what was actually a buildup of American plans to start this war. If that's true, it creates an even more absurd aspect to the complaints that they didn't come to the table, they didn't make the arrangements that we wanted vis-a-vis their nuclear program, concessions on missiles. They didn't make these clear requests reasonable in any way, engage us in any way that seemed to be reasonable, and as a result, they provoked this. If the plan was already in the works, not as a contingency, but with a move that was going to happen, with an imminence to it that did seem to be reflected in the MBS calls I talked about, in the Netanyahu calls, then it would seem as though what he's saying is just, it's so much BS. Now, what was Trump doing right before all of this happened? He's at Mar-a-Lago. Here is Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Cut 19, thank you, there it is. And he is, it's the Florida White House. And this is him enjoying himself, or at least pretending to enjoy himself, you tell me.
Is that a party?
Yeah, it's, and now they're playing the Lee Greenwood song.
Put your hands up.
There he is in the same white hat that he was going to wear, I think, in the announcement, the taped announcement saying that we're in a conflict with Iran. I mean, I'll just state this bluntly.
Wow.
You're telling me Fox News Channel would be cool if Kamala Harris was like that? If she had won and she's there at some party before she declares it's time to launch? Pretty crazy. You're telling me Fox News would have been okay if Obama had done that? Trump monitored the entire thing from Mar-a-Lago. They set up a curtain, and they created, here's the scene, you can see it. Trump monitoring the strikes from Mar-a-Lago, surrounded by thin curtains, as it's described. The White House posted this photo. Marco Rubio's there, Susie Wiles is there, CIA Director John Radcliffe is there, Dan Scavino is there. One Israeli reporter described the room as, quote, the situation room at Mar-a-Lago, referring to, a skiff, a real situation room.
It doesn't
That's
look
where
very
other presidents monitor,
soundproof.
operations. Yeah, exactly.
But look at them. They're outside even. Yeah.
It's America 4.0, everybody. President Trump taking time to pretend he's interested in what's being said. He claims the objectives of the operation in Iran are, quote, clear, destroying now Iran's missile capabilities, annihilating their navy, preventing them from ever having nuclear weapons. These are all things to which he's referred. He adds that the country cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside their borders. So that's one thing he's talking about. He's also talking about regime change, about replacing that despotic, horrifyingly awful, extreme religious regime with something else. We don't know what. In fact, when asked about that, he made a reference to the fact that, well, we killed a lot of those people who might be replacements for Khamenei. And so it's unclear who would actually replace Khamenei. By the way, just on that, and again, I'm an American, okay? I was born and raised here, and I love a lot of things about this country. But what's happening here to me is just, again, not thought out, full of bluster. Seems like a crew that's high on their own supply. They think that everything they do with the American military is not only leverage, but it's a plan for domination. And I just don't know if that's really a good attitude. But when we pat ourselves on the back, as I've seen in reporting from the New York Times about how the CIA monitored the comings and goings of Khamenei for weeks ahead of this strike so that they'd know when to take him out, where did they take him out? Anybody know where Khamenei was taken out? You probably do. He was taken out at his office. He went to the same office every day. He said, according to reporting, that after being warned that he should change his routine, this is a horrible guy, okay? Let's be clear. This is an awful guy. I mean, this is a ding-dong, the witch is dead. Horrible, awful guy. But here's what he said. I'm not going to change my pattern of life because the Americans are going to attack. I'm going to go to the office every day. I will be martyred if I need to be. That was his stated position. So there was no great CIA, spycraft associated with finding him. He drove in the same car, went to the same office. So I'm just saying, please. And now to a couple of the comments over the weekend. You can imagine the apologists, the explanologists, they're explaining, well, let me tell you what President Trump meant. Here is, play me cut 5, and then I'll let you then hear from Jake Tapper, who talked to Donald Trump just a few minutes ago. But just because I was talking about the plan, give me a little bit of cut 5. This is Congressman Mike Turner on Face the Nation yesterday. Go ahead.
Sites. But they had continued to amass missile technology and missile inventory. They had continued, as
Iran continues to be.
had been declared to pursue their intention of nuclear enrichment. They had continued.
Rubio said they weren't enriching.
They had continued their intention to pursue nuclear enrichment. They had said and declared that they were going to do that. Their programs had not been completely abolished, and their intention had not been abolished. They remained a threat, and the fact that we had the ability to intervene, that imminence is incredibly important. This standard of what is imminent. I mean, you.
Well, people want to know why. Why now? That's why I'm asking.
Because the opportunity is there to eliminate an imminent threat that is a imminent threat to the United States and our operations and in the area and our ally.
So it wasn't imminent. It was just an intent. The intent was imminent. He told Jonathan Karl that he wanted to kill the Ayatollah before he could kill Trump. Michael Hernandez, thank you for that. I will say this. I mentioned this, I think, to somebody over the weekend. I think one of the things you always kind of wonder what pushed Trump over the finish line on this, and I mentioned the 4 calls from Saudis from MBS, who's very tight with this crew, with the Trump crew. Also, Benjamin Netanyahu is very tight with this crew also. I do think that the threat of assassination or the anger that it might have produced in Trump, that the Iranians had assassination plans associated with Donald Trump, taking him out, that could have helped to move it across the finish line. But now to Jake Tapper. Thank you, Tony, because Tapper just spoke to Trump, and this is Tapper's takeaway with some quotes from Trump. Go ahead.
The president said, quote, "We're knocking the crap out of them. I think it's going very well. It's very powerful. They've got the greatest military in the world, and we're using it." I asked the president how long he thought this military operation or war might last. He said, quote, "I don't want to see it go on too long. I always thought it would be 4 weeks, and we're a little ahead of schedule." I asked the president if the U.S. was doing more than these military strikes to help the Iranian people regain control of Iran against the regime, to seize the country from the Iranian regime. And he said, "Yes," the president said, "yes, we are indeed. But right now we want everyone staying inside. It's not safe out there." And then the president said, it's about to get even less safe. He said, quote, "We haven't even started hitting them hard. The big wave hasn't even happened. The big one is coming soon." We asked him about a bunch of other stuff, too, that I'm writing up, and we'll share later on the
Okay, very good. I think, again, the rhetoric of strength is something they really enjoy doing. I don't know that it's really reflecting any coherence. I believe Trump, again, jacked up from having a successful run in Venezuela, is now taking the show on the road to Iran with an utter inability to understand the scale of what's going on in Iran, how huge a country is that can produce the kind of pushback that we're now enduring. I mean, 90 million people, but beyond that, this is a culture and an expansive nation with connections across the Middle East and the globe. I think you have to worry about the sleeper cells that could very well be in this country. It's unclear if the Austin incident with a gunman who opened fire in that bar, whether that was related or not. He had a shirt, I think, that reflected a connection to Iran. But here is the damage that Iran inflicted right away once they were dealing with the incoming American barrage. Let's go first to whatever you have up, Tony. Is this This is that Kuwait? Where is that, Kuwait? I don't know. Tell me what cut that is, if you would.
Cut 2.
Okay, so this is Dubai. Here is Dubai.
The powerful Iranian strikes have shattered Dubai's image as a luxurious safe haven of glittering hotels and high-end resorts. So too have the thick plumes of smoke that choke the skies above the Qatari capital Doha, known for its opulence and calm. The Kingdom of Bahrain also wasn't spared. Neither was Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, or Oman, where tankers were struck just off its shores in the Strait of Hormuz, a vital global shipping route where 1/5 of the world's oil passes through. In all, dozens of people have been injured and at least 4 killed in the Iranian attacks on the Gulf that have largely grounded flights and shut down commerce in the region. Tehran's decision to fire volleys of missiles and drones at the group of countries that make up the Gulf has only upped the ante. Most countries here host large U.S. military bases, housing tens of thousands of American service members, including the headquarters of the Navy's 5th Fleet in Bahrain, which was struck on Saturday. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has threatened his country's armed forces will, quote, crush the U.S. bases with force. And while most Iranian drones and missiles have been intercepted and no Gulf nation has fired back, the question now is, for how long? Fears of a sustained conflict expanding beyond Iran's borders have only grown following the killing of the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In Pakistan, pro-regime demonstrators attempted to storm the U.S. consulate in Karachi. At least 20 people were killed. Protests have also erupted in Iraq, where hundreds were pushed away from the Green Zone in Baghdad with water cannons just a short distance from the American embassy.
Now, sources inside Iran tell CBS News the regime's apparent strategy of carrying out attacks on Gulf countries is likely part of a risky effort to try and shorten the war, since the ongoing missile and drone strikes could see Arab leaders try to pressure the U.S. and Israel to end their campaign early, Jurika, an apparent gamble which so far has not paid off.
So what I have read extensively over the weekend is military strategies that actually run a little bit counter to that. And I'll just give it to you super quickly because I want to get to Gary. But they essentially point out the way in which the Iranians, overmatched by the incredible firepower of the Americans, at least initially, are now offering these volleys with drone flights that are far less expensive. You know, these drone shots are like 20,000 apiece, whereas the Americans are firing off missiles that are A, wildly expensive, and B, limited in terms of the number they have. And the idea is that by keeping these volleys going, again, lower cost, easier, and keeping them going into Israel, keeping them going into other Gulf nations, and by threatening even the Straits of Hormuz, you end up with a pressure and leverage that Iran begins to have as this conflict continues. Now, the chance you take with that is that eventually American firepower takes out a lot of your ability to fire this stuff. But in the meantime, look at all of the weaponry that is available. It's much lower cost. And even as the Americans continue the barrage, it's at tremendous expense. I also think it worth noting, and then I'll get to Gary, that friendly fire, at least that's what's being claimed as the responsible part of all of this, took down 3 American fighter jets. You have that shot, Tony? Here it is, quickly. Yeah, this is the description of what happened.
I want to talk about the friendly fire incident, Steve. Thank goodness the pilots are okay, the crew is okay, but how could something like this happen?
The fog and friction of war, George. As you know, Kuwait is right up against Iran, and Kuwait has been getting pummeled in the past few days. There's a tanker on fire. The U.S. Embassy has been hit. The airport has been hit. And so no doubt the troops in Kuwait are on high alert. They're pressured to prevent these attacks. So different country, different language, different equipment. Things can go wrong. Oftentimes, the Patriot missile system can be put on automatic. If it goes on automatic and it doesn't see the transponders, the electronic signal coming from the jets that match up what it thinks it ought to be, it will automatically fire missiles. That's the best guess right now, but it's the fog and friction of war.
Okay, so the last thing I want to say, just as a coda to that, I just want to remind you of the story that I gave you last week, which was that Pete Hegseth was pressuring an AI company to give the power to the Pentagon to have weaponry fired completely by AI without any human contact on that decision-making process. And that insistence from Pete Hegseth that was not granted by the, and I have the interview, I'll probably run it tomorrow, with the CEO of that company. That stonewalling of the Pentagon is costing them maybe their corporate life in America. Hegseth wants the ability to have AI make all the decisions without any kind of human interaction. And I think that that's worth noting when you see the mistake made with the Kuwaitis downing 3 American fighter jets. By the way, they're 100 million apiece. I see in the chat, people are asking, how much are they? They're 100 million apiece. The problem for us is that long after Trump is gone, Iranians will still remember, says Hollywood Cowgirl. Yeah, I mean, that may be the problem for us. It's certainly in the stack of problems. So we continue. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you for the super chats and the super stickers, and appreciate all your input. And we'll get to as many comments as we can as we continue. This guy is the political analyst at iHeartRadio, also at the CBS television stations. Our former colleague, he is Gary Dietrich. Thank you for being here, sir. Give me some thoughts on what's happening, if you would.
Well, Mark, I personally would be remiss. I think we would be, perhaps knowing you've probably already addressed this, but the loss of human life has to come first. I mean, there's no getting around that. We now have 4 American servicemen. It's been confirmed that 3 died immediately, as you know, and then 1 that was severely wounded has now died. So we've got a casualty list as of now of 4 American military men. But of course, that goes way beyond that. There have been people killed in many of these other countries, in Israel and some of the others that you mentioned, the other Middle Eastern states that have been under attack, not to mention, of course, Iranians that have lost their lives as well. So, there's no getting around the fact that this goes so beyond just, strategic policy, et cetera, and where are we going to go with the Trump administration. But I think that's really important to point out right away. Now, those 3 jets that you mentioned, Mark, were F-15 Falcons. We may well find out down the road as well. These are not our, 4th and 5th generation kinds of fighter jets. These are ones that are not F-35s, F-22s that have a lot more stealthy capabilities, as they say. Whether that factors into this or not, I don't know. We'll find that out certainly down the road here. But the larger question right now, and you did do a great job, Mark, in the intro of talking about what is, and one of the most interesting and perplexing parts of this whole thing right now is what is going to happen with all the Middle Eastern neighbors of Iran. They gathered over the weekend. They issued a joint proclamation basically saying, look, we're on top of this, and if need be, we will respond militarily as well. That's a tripwire that hasn't happened yet, as you noted. But, the Saudis, and a lot of these other countries, they have their own military might as well. They haven't opened those doors yet. But when people start talking about the, capacities of the U.S. and the Israeli forces, you can't leave out that if Iran continues this campaign of attacking their neighbors, it's hard to imagine them not getting involved at some point.
Does the posture of America, which seems pretty committed to not only regime change, but sort of a changing landscape of demand associated with reducing the military capabilities and capacity of Iran, does that figure into anything that brings coherence to this? I can't find a coherent policy or goal articulated by the Americans in all of this.
Yeah, well, really, if you want to take the thread that runs through all this, Mark, and a lot of Iran's neighbors do agree with some of this perspective, there's really three components to it. One is the support of Iranian proxies, as you know, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis out of Yemen. A lot of those, by the way, there's no fan of the Iranian neighbors of a lot of those groups as well. And so that was one of the gauntlets that was thrown down, that Iran apparently in the negotiations that were continuing clear up until, I guess, Thursday, some say into Friday, was stopping support of those groups, and the Iranians would not agree to that. Secondly, is the increasing development of ballistic missile capability. That too is something that has people nervous. Their current capabilities apparently stretch as far as, for example, Southern Europe. That was something the European Union and NATO is getting increasingly concerned about. And the third was, of course, the development of nuclear weapons. There's a lot of debate about that. How far were they? How much did they, regenerated the program or tried to rehabilitate it or protect it after the attacks last June on their nuclear facilities? But there were verified satellite images of them going back to those sites, at least trying to recover uranium. There was apparently, and finally, Mark, there's apparently attempts to say, hey, look, we'll get you enough enriched uranium if you want a nuclear power program, but it's the centrifuge program. It's the continued refinement. And that was where the negotiations were last week. But those are the real components. And again, those are, at least in terms of aims of keeping Iran from those things, are really the threads that tie all this together. For example, for NATO, the U.S., Israel, and those Middle Eastern countries.
I'm just seeing a piece here I wanted to share with you, because when you look at the origins of this conflict, which I think will be looked at for many years to come, I get the Israel thing. I'm seeing Israel, everybody Israel. Of course, Israel is head of the parade, came in with the Americans with a heavy hand. But Riyadh, the Saudis, had a huge hand in this, apparently. Saudi Crown Prince reportedly pressed U.S. for military action against Iran. It is the case that MBS held multiple private calls with U.S. President Donald Trump, urging him to launch military action against Tehran promptly. 4 people familiar with the matter saying that even as Riyadh publicly backed a diplomatic solution, the Crown Prince privately pressed Trump to act with Israel's support. Speak to the relationship here that I feel is missed as people are overrunning the play a little bit in different ways when they try to decode what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part, Mark, that you're right, has kind of been missed over the weekend, understandably. I mean, these things are moving so quickly, but that reporting that you are sharing has not been rebuffed by anybody. The Saudis, the Americans, the Israelis. I mean, by all accounts, and it's been from multiple sources, by all accounts, that's true. And, the Saudis, again, they are really, everybody globally views the Saudis as really the linchpin in the Middle East. I mean, they're the ones with the biggest resources, the biggest landmass. They're the ones that have sort of, if there is a competing power to Iran in the Middle East, it's clearly led by Saudi Arabia. And so you're right. By all accounts, the Saudis were saying, and you heard this in the last few weeks, Saudis and other Middle Eastern countries were saying, hey, let's not rush into this. Let's not. Publicly, the face was, let's keep the negotiations going. But apparently, privately, they were more than ready to have this happen. And so when that, ill-fated grouping of Khamenei and the leadership happened on Saturday morning, apparently, by the way, they'd been monitoring and waiting for this kind of a conclave for months. This had been something that all these parties had been monitoring carefully. And when it finally happened, that's why, by the way, just parenthetically, people ask, why did this attack happen early on a morning? All these attacks had happened at night. That's why, because the meeting convened at 8 a.m. And so it's apparently 6 a.m. Israel time, boom, off things went.
We just had a poll up there. I think Kim posted it for a second in the CNN poll, which is reflected, I think, in many other polling. These are flash polls that are done. Overall, 59% of Americans disapproving of the initial decision to strike Iran, with 41% approving. Strong disapproval, 31%. And 16% even stronger disapproval, I guess. But in any case, the bottom line, without even getting into the numbers so granularly, is that it's not popular, okay? That might be a way to put it. I mean, when Bush went into Iraq, his presidency was buoyed by sort of this the wartime president stuff, rah, 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 America. This is an effort that is completely absent of any of that.
Well, Americans are concerned. I mean, there's an Ipsos poll out that reflects that. I haven't seen these new CNN numbers, but they sound almost exactly the same, very similar to the Ipsos numbers. And you're right, Mark, it's early. You have to wait on some of these things. But Americans are, to say they're gun shy is not meant to be a humorous pun. I mean, they are concerned about injecting American forces abroad. And especially, Mark, the real critical polling is going to happen in the next 7 to 10 days in light of American casualties. That is something, when you had the attacks last summer, on the nuclear facilities, of course, Americans came back from that unscathed with the B-2s, et cetera. When you had Maduro, plucked, yes, there were some American wounded, most notably and now famously, the gentleman, the officer that received the Medal of Valor at the State of the Union address, shot 4 times in the leg as a chopper pilot. But Americans sort of said, okay, but when you start having dead Americans, this is going to be a Rubicon that's why you see Hegseth out this morning, Trump out this morning, trying to provide a rationale for this. Especially, Mark, I would simply note that those attacks, those strikes that we just talked about, capturing Maduro, that happened in like 24, 48 hours. Now there's talk about this going 3 to 4 weeks. That is going to be a challenge. Tomorrow, the Congress is going to take up a war powers resolution. That's not likely to go anywhere. There's actually bipartisan sort of fervor on both sides of that. John Fetterman coming out over the weekend supporting, as you know, the president's actions. But there's going to be a lot of soul gazing on this about going forward and the American populace and where they are on this. Look, you can't divorce this from 8 months away from a midterm election. And many of these people in Congress having to go home and defend these actions to their own constituents.
I guess that's kind of what I was getting at, and I think that, I mean, again, in the face of American casualties and casualties everywhere. I mean, they're dead people all over the Middle East right now. MAGA and the MAGA movement is having a come to Jesus moment, because this epic fury in Iran is not what they bargained for. I mean, Trump really played himself as the peacemaker, going to end all these wars. And so the MAGA coalition, however that exists, and I think you have a better handle on it than I do, they're not rah-rah, yeah, let's get this done, Mr. President.
Well, this is another one of those really just sort of profound political moments when certain elements of the MAGA coalition and certain elements of the far left are in total agreement that this should not have happened. And that's one of the political conundrums of our time, Mark, is that you have people on both ends of the spectrum that agree on something like this. And so, frankly, it obviously politically would have been far better, even with the movement of all the American assets and personnel and the staging of those in the Middle East, had they been able to get the Iranians to come to the table and agree on those 3 to 4 major points we talked about earlier and be done with it at that point, it would have been one thing. But I think frankly, the Saudi pressure, we're going to hear eventually what some of those elements were, why they were pressuring the White House. But it really boils down to that there was a feeling that the Iranians were not negotiating in good faith in the long term, that these things were not going to be resolved. The support of the proxies, the uranium enrichment, the ballistic missiles, et cetera, they just weren't going to be resolved without force. I think that's what we're going to come to. Some people are going to support that. Many people are not.
Well, I'll play you a couple of things, and I'll start with really a surprising one to me. In my judgment, Eric Prince is one of the villains of my lifetime. He is the CEO of Blackwater at the time, benefited enormously from Iraq, a private army. He's these are mercenaries. These are mercenary armies, and these are contracts that are done in a mercenary way all across the globe, not just in America, but elsewhere. So Eric Prince, this is cut 10, Tony. Eric Prince, he, as you properly described, finds himself oddly on adversarial footing with those who support this action. Go ahead.
I'm not happy about the whole thing. I don't think this was in America's interest. It's going to uncork a significant can of worms and chaos and destruction in Iran now. Who takes over? You still have tens, hundreds of thousands of IRGC people that will be positioning to be number two, to be the next rulers of that country. I don't see how this is in keeping with the president's MAGA commitment. I'm disappointed.
And there you go. And then he brings up something that I did want to ask you about. There is sort of this Trumpian, lay down your weapons, you'll all be pardoned, or whatever. He really didn't, and the Revolutionary Guard, they're serious fighters, and there are a lot of them. And they lay down their weapons to who? To the people who they just slaughtered, who are protesting? I mean, the after-action plan seems not half-baked. It seems not baked at all.
Well, there's two components to that, Mark. One is, is there a sort of leader in waiting? Now, as you know, the Crown Prince of Iran has said, I'm prepared to step in an interim government format, he said, holding a referendum / elections somewhere here. He says his time frame was in the next year or two. But who's going to respect that? That's the question mark. To your point, power abhors a vacuum. And right now there's a vacuum. And the only people able and armed and sort of organized to step into that are the people that were already in power without the now top echelon of that. The other thing is the people themselves, right? I mean, is there capacity for a quote unquote people's revolution? Well, most observers say no, because these people were prohibited from having any kind of arms. There's no Second Amendment in Iran. You don't get to keep and bear your arms, right? And so that's the other challenge is even if the people wanted to rise up, would it be in a completely, not necessarily nonviolent, but unarmed fashion? Who's going to arm those people, especially when, you just played that cut, which rightly points out that there's not just a few, there are hundreds of thousands of the Revolutionary Guard armed and ready. So that's going to be a challenge. But what's interesting to me about that, Mark, is that those elements are well known by Iran's neighbors, by the Saudis, for example. They know the disconnect there, and yet they pressed for this apparently. They wanted this to happen. So, do they have a plan? I mean, do they plan to exert, and their fellow, Arab neighbors exert some power into Iran? I mean, there's so many unknowns at this point.
I wanted to play you one more cut because there is a sense in Iran from those who are in official positions that we're going to fight this out. This is an existential threat to them. So this isn't a one-and-done mic drop moment that I think Trump is looking for, the way he had found in Venezuela. This is going to be a grappling match, it would seem. Play me cut 17, if you would, which is the Iran spokesman, Abbas Araghchi. Tony's getting it for you now. The idea that, everybody's been taken out, yeah, I think there's tremendous damage being done, but clearly there were plans in place, regardless of leadership, to be able to respond to this initial American and Israeli volley. Here is what he had to say yesterday.
Well, we have lost some commanders, that is a fact, and the names are already announced. But another fact is that nothing has changed in our, military capability. This is exactly what happened last time. You remember in June when Israel attacked us, they killed some of our top commanders at the beginning of the strikes, but they were replaced very soon. And in less than 12 hours, we were able to start retaliation. This time, it was even, faster. In less than 2 hours, we started to retaliate by attacking, Israeli targets and American bases in the region, and we have continued to do so. So our military is in place. They are capable enough to defend our country. Even more, they are more prepared and capable than previous war, before 12-day war. Quality-wise, quantity-wise, they are in a better position. And I think you have seen how they, acted so far.
So I think that that's worth noting here, Gary, because as I say, I think Trump is kind of looking for his one and done 12-day situation with the bombing, the Venezuelan thing that I mentioned. Now, he's kind of gotten high on his own supply, I think, and this is going to be a far more complicated endeavor.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. That is, I think, widely agreed. The questions, the proof's going to be in the pudding, Mark. To quite put it simply, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to know how degraded these Iranian forces are. If we're still at a stalemate that we are now, and there's still things coming out of Iran that are doing significant damage, that's their hope, is that, people will sort of capitulate and say, okay, well, enough's enough, right? But if it looks like in a couple of weeks' time, like their capacities have been significantly degraded and they are not really able to respond, that's when the regime is going to feel at its most vulnerable. There's one other piece of this that is quite profound, Mark, and that is, the Iranian connection, for example, to Russian supplies the Iranian connection to Russia for the Ukrainian war supplies, the drones, right, et cetera. Does this begin to diminish Russian capabilities in Ukraine, and also oil, particularly for the Chinese, dependent 15 to 20% on Iranian oil. And, so there's a lot of sort of spillover effect to this. Could those two countries begin to rein in Iran's ambitions, for example, by saying, look, this is affecting us as well. You got to do something. You got to come to the table and wrap this up somehow. Right now, you have to believe there are just multitudinous back channel conversations going on. Trump even claims that Iranian leaders, some of them, are reaching out to Washington. We'll see. Well,
just because you mentioned oil, I'm just going to give you a quick word from an oil expert. This is kind of her sense of things. And I feel as though they can keep the leverage on the Strait of Hormuz going for quite some time. I mean, just the threat has created a logjam of oil tanker ships that just aren't even going to pass through because insurance companies won't insure them, et cetera. I mean, it becomes the cost of doing business so witheringly expensive that you just can't get through. Here is, and there's a great shot, thank you, Tony, of the Strait of Hormuz. That's the key route for global oil transport. Play me cut 3. This is, again, from an oil expert just weighing in on the situation that Gary touched on.
I think there was a view because U.S. oil production had been so high that this would only be a sort of a blip when it came to oil prices. But again, I think the problem is that if we have a closure of a critical waterway, or again, just nobody willing to go through there, there's not an offset in terms of additional supplies. You're essentially making Middle East production stranded assets.
Again, one of the things that's pointed to is that the reserve supplies of oil have been exhausted in this country. Remember, Biden released all of those. And so, again, for a crew that I already feel is of questionable competence, to be polite, they really haven't worked out some of the downstream effects of this action. One last word, if you would, Gary. Thanks.
Yeah, well, who's going to be affected more directly, more immediately, are the Europeans, for example, liquid natural gas, et cetera. They're looking at price spikes and supply concerns far quicker than the United States is. So that too. How much does NATO, how much does the European Union get involved in this and say, look, all you players involved, we can only deal with this for so long. There's so many different components. Really, this stretches, Mark, to your point, globally. This is not limited just to the Middle East. And so there's going to be a lot of players with a lot of interest exerting a lot of pressure in the coming weeks.
Thanks for bringing some coherence to I think, a situation and a policy that lacks coherence. At least there's coherence about that which we should be concerned about. And I look forward to talking to you again, Gary. Always appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Gary Dietrich, everyone. And of course, Gary is brought to us by you folks in Northern California. You should get in touch with Bill Campbell. He's at Remax Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, we have a big chunk of Northern California. Yeah, listeners and viewers, you need a highly respected real estate agent or professional in any way. He can help you with appraisals. He can help you with financing. Bill Campbell, Remax Gold. Call or text him 530-448-7474, 530-448-7474. 7474. Bill Campbell Remax Gold.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'll ask Sarah to wait one more minute while I just give a quick shout out to our sponsors, the partners who are involved in this independent media game. We are so grateful for Zellman's. Zellman's is a product. We road tested this product before we brought them on the air with us. Zellman's Minty Mouth, they're called. I know. It's crazy. If you want to get the nasty taste of whatever you ate, both out of your mouth and out of your gut is where it all starts. It's clinically tested to produce fresh breath. I can't help you with the bad taste in your mouth from American foreign policy. I can help you with the bad taste in your mouth that comes from your gut. Tiny capsules with huge results. Powerful mint is on the outside. So when you pop this thing in, you'll get a nice blast and it cleans out that bad taste. But what really is happening on the inside, because you swallow the pill after that, it's like a little capsule. It releases this parsley seed oil, and it works. And it works to neutralize those odors that come up, and in your gut, they are creating bad breath. Gluten-free, keto-friendly, alcohol-free, and you get a discount. Zellman's, Z-E-L-M-I-N-S, Zellmans.com, Mark T at checkout for 15% off. Zellman's. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
You know what a huge fan of Sarah Kendzior I am. I love her books. I actually cracked one of them over the weekend just for kind of a little reread, her latest, which is sort of this great memoir that meets history, really. And it's a little different than some of her other stuff, and I find it's just a great both history lesson and also emotional journey. But now she's here on this playing field with us, dealing with some really intense stuff. How about it for the great Sarah Kendzior, everyone? Yeah, that's it. The Last American Road Trip is what it's called. You see it up there on the screen. There are links to all of Sarah's stuff under this video, as they always are. Sarah, I want to ask you something that you are very much familiar with and have written about extensively. I mean, you have, I think, you've created a trail for many of us in the Epstein world and the Epstein questions to an international crime syndicate, an international syndicate of the elite that both covers up and also pursues human trafficking internationally, and a financial depth of misdeeds and illegalities that are all covered up. So with this too long a preamble, let me ask you whether or not the Iranian move here on the part of the president is in any way related to his fear of what's in the Epstein files. So many people are saying it serves a couple of purposes here, both the ends articulated by the Americans, the Israelis, the Saudis, etc., and also a distraction from the Epstein files. Any truth to that?
It's definitely not a distraction from the Epstein files. And in fact, reminds me of the Epstein files. I don't understand how an operation instigated by Israel with U.S. assistance and compliance could possibly distract me from the Epstein-Maxwell operation, which of course, is tied to Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert, otherwise known as Israel's super spy. He died in 1991, and Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein continued the operation. Before that, Maxwell was heavily involved in Iran-Contra. He was linked to a lot of people who were also in Trump's orbit, including Adnan Khashoggi, the arms dealer. It's the same cast of characters from the 1980s. And, one of the main people in this orbit is, of course, Netanyahu, who, did me a favor of having to make this case today by outright saying, thank you, Trump and America, for making my 40-year dream come true. Like, this is what he's referring to in the timeline, matches up with Iran-Contra, matches up with the Epstein-Maxwell operation. So when you can't really understand one without understanding the other to some extent. So yeah, definitely not a distraction.
Yeah, I mean, you read about Iran-Contra extensively, and the roots of the problems and agendas related to Iran do extend back decades, and it's not just an Israeli agenda.
Yeah. Oh God, definitely not. No, it's transnational organized crime linked to a number of extremely corrupt governments, including the government of the United States. And again, you see recurring people. It was Bill Barr under the first Bush administration who buried the Iran-Contra criminals, who let them go free and buried the evidence. Even William Safire, the conservative pundit at that point, called him the cover-up general. So when Me Too brought Epstein kind of back into light, when Julie K. Brown's essays, her investigative reporting for the Miami Herald, brought back Epstein, and you see in all those emails that were released that they felt threatened by Me Too. Who did they install in late 2018 as the new attorney general right after the Kavanaugh hearings? They bring back Bill Barr because Bill Barr is the kind of guy who you call to clean up something like Iran-Contra, to clean up something like Epstein. As for the goals of this, what's important to note is that, of course, none of this is beneficial in any way to the American people or to our, sovereignty, to our basic survival. It's in fact incredibly threatening to our basic survival. This is being done primarily on behalf of Israel, but also on behalf of Israel's most right-wing, hardcore actors, people like, Ariel Sharon and then Netanyahu. And, this has really been left out of the conversation. The Kahanists, now called the Koch Party, which was a, Jewish supremacist extremist movement run by a man named Meir Kahane, who was a terrorist, committed a large number of bombings while also collaborating with the FBI. He also, was killed kind of under mysterious circumstances in 1991, right around the time Robert Maxwell was. But anyway, that party, the Kahanists and Koch, was banned by Israel, and it was also banned by the United States. It was listed as a terrorist network. In 2022, Biden took them off of the terrorist network for the first time in decades. And so that was a very strange thing to do. I remember noticing this at the time and thinking, why aren't people talking about this? Because what it did was allow, the Israeli government, which had been moving steadily to the right, basically since 2009, since Netanyahu was in, and, they themselves had banned this party. That party is now all over the Knesset, and they're the people who are overseeing genocide. They're the people who are overseeing this move for what, was envisioned in the early 80s as greater Israel, this destruction and fracturing of the Middle East into little tiny parts for domination. And there are a lot of people who want to benefit from that, plutocrats, oligarchs, mafiosos, mercenaries, like basically every bad person in the world wants a piece of that action. And that includes Donald Trump, and it includes the people in his fold.
It is true that Trump was oddly transfixed by a relationship with the Saudis and with Middle Eastern leaders. Initially, I'm talking about Trump in season 1, the first 4 years. And his first overseas trip was to Saudi Arabia, as I recall. And the kind of love he's gotten from that crew in the form of billions of dollars flowing into crypto that he's benefited from, even the Kushner influx of money, the Saudis having hooked him up with a couple of billion for his fund when he left government after the first 4 years. And by the way, we were promised with that $2 billion that, oh, don't worry, he's not going to have anything to do with any sort of American policy moving forward. He's left government. Well, here he is at the very center of negotiations involving Iran and the Middle East and elsewhere. So this idea somehow that the oligarchical structure of the Middle East kind of interlocks with that in America is played out sort of, to use the title of one of your books, in plain sight, or it really is something that it should be quite clear to everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And Kushner is the key person to look at. I've been saying this since 2016 when Kushner was having illicit meetings with a number of Russian, Israeli, and other officials before Trump was actually made president, but after he was said to have won the election. What I believe they were doing at these meetings, which, some of whom involved an Epstein associate named Vitaly Churkin, the Russian ambassador to the UN, who was later, he also died under mysterious circumstances. You're going to have to keep like a running tally of everyone I mentioned in this way in this episode. In early 2017, what I did not know, and most people did not know at the time, is that he was a lifelong associate and helper of Jeffrey Epstein. But anyway, the point is that Kushner is brokering these deals. And I think the point of these deals was this idea that they would, redefine the borders of the world in order for, resource hoarding, retaking of territory, mass murder of indigenous populations, and just, of people in general. So on board to this horrific outing came a lot of techno-fascists, people like Peter Thiel, people involved in AI, people who could streamline this process and make it much more feasible, because as Netanyahu has outright admitted, this was his lifelong dream. It was not the easiest dream in the world to achieve because it involves the annihilation of the countries that surround Israel. But with the help of, say, a criminal enterprise masquerading as a government, during Trump's first term, that has no regard for national security in any kind of typical way, that trades state secrets, that's very tight with oligarchs, and that includes Putin, MBS, Netanyahu, Erdogan, all sorts of individuals. It is possible to achieve this horrific goal, which will cause bloodshed and mass murder and destruction. I think, certainly throughout the Middle East, but I worry it will also extend much more widely than that. It is not possible in such a, interlinked world for these things to be contained. I mean, I think we should have learned this lesson long ago. We should have learned this lesson with Iraq. And so I don't know what's coming down the line, but, I was born around the time of the Iranian Revolution and the aftermath and the October surprise and all these things. And my whole life, I've been hearing that this day is coming where the United States would invade Iran. And finally, it is here. And, I've awaited this moment too, only with incredible dread. And I'm horrified that this particular administration is at the helm when they finally go through with this action.
Well, it's interesting to note that Trump refers to what you're talking about. He refers to 1979. He refers to the Iranian hostages. I mean, he's referring to them now. I mean, as though, like, this is the payback we've been lying in the weeds to get. And so it's not the first thing that's articulated as a goal. I mean, that is associated with nuclear development, then it's the missiles, but it's laid into the list of grievances that Trump has produced. So I think you're focusing in any way on what's happened with the Iranian Revolution and going back to 1979 is very relevant to what's happening today.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a coincidence that there's a lot of septuagenarians and octogenarians leading this policy. They have wanted to see this for a long time. They know their time is coming to an end. I don't think Trump has any particular ideological commitment. I kind of caught the end part of your previous segment, where you're saying he likes to just kind of do a one and done. And that's exactly how he operates. He wants to kidnap the president of Venezuela. So he grabs him. He'll drop a, MOAB on Afghanistan. He did that in his first term. And then, a lot of these things don't go anywhere. Like he sees it like a reality show. These are the plot twists. These are the series finale or the season finales. Like what I'm worried about is like a season finale, like for Earth, because my fear with Trump, because he's not the architect of this plan, he is somebody who is carrying it out, is that if he wants to get it one and done, I'm hoping that the murder of Ayatollah Khamenei suffices for him, because otherwise what he has talked about since the 1980s has been using a nuke. and he's expressed great fear about the proliferation of nuclear weapons. That fear was converted into, hey, I'm now the guy who can drop these weapons. This is something he talked about during his first term. If we have them, why can't we use them? That is his perspective. And I think that mindset, combined with his desire for a war to end quickly, he doesn't want to be in a quagmire. He doesn't want to be a Vietnam, Iraq war kind of president. And, he's getting on in years. He may want to rush this in the worst possible way. A better way to rush this would be to end it completely, would be to pull us all out of this situation, America, completely. I don't know, though, because I think he's in hock to a whole bunch of people who are actually the architects of this, both Americans and Israelis and, others within the Middle East and Russia and other states.
So let me just run this past you. These are some comments and questions for you. Happy Monday, Mark. Using the Zionists are making Trump do the attack on Iran. If he does not do it, says Chaplain Fred, they will push the Epstein files agenda to blackmail Trump. It's called the honey trap. Is that what's happening as well? Thank you, Chaplain Fred, for that. To what extent is this some leverage that, again, I always worry about the Zionists. I don't know what that means even. It becomes this term that I think could be weaponized in all these legitimately awful ways. But in any case,
just limited it to the people who have the blackmail material and actually can use it. I think to blackmail Trump. People at that level of power and influence. That's an important group. I think this is a question worth, I don't know if I can answer it, but I think it's a question worth exploring because of the timing, because we saw initially, suddenly Epstein is kind of brought up out of the blue in July of last year after there was a flirtation with invading Iran that was then brought back. Then suddenly we're hearing about Epstein. Then we get a little leak or a little, bit of information earlier, I guess like late 2025. We get more in the beginning of January. We get the giant trove, the incredibly, horrific trove of documents at the end of January, the ones that finally sealed in people's mind what has been in the public domain but was denied, which is that, Trump is an accused pedophile rapist several times over by many different, women, who said that he assaulted them when they were girls. And it still is not the full trove of information. We know that Epstein and Maxwell were linked to, probably multiple intelligence networks, among them the US and also Israel. We know that Israel wants this war. And so I could envision a situation where Trump, who's not adverse to mass murder, like he could not care less. I need to stress this point. He's not a peacenik or a dove, contrary to what the New York Times says. He doesn't care, but he can be perhaps persuaded if there's something so incredibly horrific in those files that hasn't been released yet, that I suspect may be video, to do what others want. They would not have created this amount of blackmail material for decades on end if they did not feel a need to control people. And by they, I'm really talking about like a big block of people who I think have used this information for different purposes at different times. The current use of this information, I think, is possibly being directed towards a war in Iran, because it's a little too uncanny that after this, I think Trump, they may have threatened to release something else unless the United States invaded Iran along with Israel. And I think at that point, Trump might have said, well, fine, we'll kill the Ayatollah. Like, is that good enough? And I'm afraid the answer is usually no when it comes to Israel, and especially Netanyahu as an individual and his desire to take over and destroy the surrounding region.
So it's not the Epstein files per se, it's related to the Epstein files and compromat associated potentially with the Epstein files, and then power brokers with access and that leverage in all of that. So it's way more complicated and detailed than just the Epstein files. I think it's kind of been reduced to, he's doing this as a distraction from the Epstein files, because he's worried that when the Epstein files and the details come out in the unredacted version, we get access to that, he's going to be all over it like a bad smell. And the reality is that, but that's really not just what the story is.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is incapable of shame. And there have been an enormous number of stories revealing him to do, doing horrific things. He has confessed to horrific things. He doesn't care as long as he's not held legally liable or constrained in any way. There are only a few universal taboos that I think he would be afraid to cross. I do think pedophilia is one of them, which is why there is this attempt to redefine it, to say, if it's a 13-year-old, it's not that bad. It's not like they were four. You see all of these rationalizations. You see people in the past, like Alan Dershowitz, of course, both Trump and Epstein's lawyer, writing op-eds, kind of defending pedophilia in this regard. There are other things, murder, torture of children, incest. I think that there's been an attempt to normalize some of these things. I think during Israel's live stream genocide, people got accustomed in a way to seeing images of dead children and tortured children every day. Hopefully they did not become accustomed to it and that it didn't break their heart every single time that they saw it. But this is something new, not the action, but the ability to see this sort of genocide on a phone, to see it constantly. Obviously there've been atrocities in the past that have equaled or surpassed this, but I think that did a number on people. But I think the goal of releasing it, letting it be open in that way, might have been to try to desensitize the population of the world so that they don't feel as much when they say read about other child victims. But I don't think that that's the way human beings operate. I really don't. I think even after all this, most people, they know how awful this is. They know how wrong this is. The reaction to the US bombing of the girls' school in Iran, again, showed that, the vast majority of Americans don't want this. We don't want to be part of an operation that's butchering children, which, this is what it will be. So yeah, I don't think Trump cares that much if he is, but if it's something very personal to him, something that would really destroy his reputation, even his reputation as a bad guy, I think that they do have something on him. Usually he's a volunteer, usually he's a collaborator willingly, but I think they also, just in case, gather materials that he does not want out in order to control him when need be.
There's this closing ranks that his party does, though, just in terms of America and American policy and politics. It's quite stunning. There's no break. And the Democrats are this big tent. They've always had that sort of moniker associated with them. And yet the reality is that big tent creates all of these different coalitions within. And it's harder to get them to walk in lockstep. But wow, play a little Ted Cruz. I mean, Ted Cruz sort of keeping the bobbing and weaving going that's associated with the end goals of all of this. This is just stuff from over the weekend.
To the fact that 3 U.S. service members were killed as part of this operation, 5 others are seriously wounded.
Well, it is no doubt tragic anytime American servicemen and women lose their lives, and when a nation engages in military conflict, unfortunately, casualties are part of the risk calculus. President Trump's decision to go into Iran and to go in with overwhelming force is the most consequential decision of his presidency. I believe it was the right decision. I spent the entire day with him Friday, the day before he launched this attack, and he and I discussed it at great length. And I think the president is acting to keep America safe and to make America safer. What I urged President Trump on Friday, I said, this regime is teetering. It is hanging by a thread. Do not miss this opportunity, because removing this regime that wants to murder us. Remember, this Ayatollah has for months hired hitmen with the stated purpose of murdering President Donald J. Trump. Removing this regime from power makes America much, much safer.
So just to be clear, your argument for the why now is the weakness of that regime, not the imminent threat of the missiles that they have had and they've been building for a very long time.
That's precisely the argument I presented to the president, is this opportunity is here, it is now, and removing the Ayatollah makes America much, much safer.
I want to start with your
So the I think there's bobbing and weaving there, but I thought that was revealing because, Sarah, I was saying before, I think one of the things that maybe dragged him across the finish line on this, I mean, again, I think he's looking for the one and done moment, sort of the mic drop after Venezuela made him think, oh, I can go in here and blast these Iranians out, take out the top dude, do my victory lap and go back to my board of peace or whatever. But the thing that I think helped get him there was what Cruz said. I mean, again, this is all speculation, of course, but that, hey, this is the guy who wants to assassinate you. They've got a plan to have cells in this country to assassinate you, Mr. President. Now they're weak. You should go for this. I think this constellation of things, the missiles, nuclear assassination, it all sort of fueled this plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing because I think Trump is afraid of his own mortality. I honestly think he's more afraid, though, of dying from, a disease. Before COVID, oddly, he was known as, I think Politico called him the Purell president. He was constantly hand washing. He was always terrified of getting sick. Being assassinated, honestly, he seems to react rather joyously to that prospect. He did in the summer of 2024 when he had his little, Kodak moment where he got up and, pumped his fist and whatnot. Seemed pretty chill about the whole thing. So I don't know. I don't know if Ted Cruz telling him, hey, like you're going to get capped by the Ayatollah. Like, I'm not sure how much weight that holds, especially, you're going to get killed by some 86-year-old guy who just like tweets at you all day long, like, little, the two of them going back and forth. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of like a humiliating way to go down. It might be, something else. One thing I am concerned about, though, is that Trump, they may be stirring this narrative for another reason, because I think they know that if America hears, Trump may be assassinated, there could well be a collective shrug. I think, though, that they are doing what they did in the years in the run up to 9/11, which is getting us back into, orange alert mentality. Like, remember orange alert? We're always supposed to be scared all the time. But they actually have, from what I read, weakened the border. Like they go on and on about, oh my God, we have these hordes of migrants coming in. They're so dangerous. We must deport them and put them in our concentration camps. But meanwhile, when it comes to actual national security issues, they don't care. And I think they're trying to get us in this frame of mind that we may be terror attacked, and then they will exploit that should it happen. I hope it does not happen, in the same way that George Bush exploited 9/11 afterwards, where it led to multiple wars. Usually Trump doesn't bother with a pretext, so I'm guessing it's the Republican Party who are maybe trying to give us something to chew on. I mean, honestly, that would be a real throwback moment because they haven't cared what the public thought in a really long time. They're going to act like we have legitimate elections and public approval polls that matter to them again. Like that would be a new thing for the Republicans to do. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I mean, that last thing that Sarah's saying is really something worth keeping in mind, because if there were to be some event here that would all of a sudden animate interest and support for actions overseas, that would be taking this to, and this is a weird thing to say because I feel like we're already at like the top level, but another level, Wow. All right. I'll share this. Luis says, I didn't realize it's board of peace, meaning he's going to leave the Middle East in pieces to be divided up among his rogue gallery of scum and villainy. So thank you for the
good
super
one.
chat. Yeah,
Luis.
good one.
That's a
Luis
good one.
is always funny. Sarah Kendzior is brilliant. Says underdog. We know that. That's why we invite her on, and we're so excited. Holly Hinman says Sarah has a very interesting Substack. Yeah, and we link to the Substack under this video. Look, congrats on everything, always. And again, as I was saying, the Last American Road Trip is one of your great books, but there is a link to all of them. And there is the Substack. If you want to take a look, there is a link to it under this video. Sarah, thank you. And I hope we're around for next, for the next.
Let's see. Let's hope so. All right.
All right. All the best. Sarah Kendzior, everybody. Right on, everyone. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I mean, it's hour to hour, it feels like. Things are pretty crazy. Looking at comments that are
your comments.
I saw a couple of them that, as I say, I guess art of the deal, says Blue Spark, is where you lash out with whatever you can when things don't go your way. Yeah, I don't even know what his situation is on this. It feels like a Hi, Sarah, says Hula Steph. I'm sure you know that the people who hate Netanyahu the most are the Israelis. Do you think they like having to hide in bunkers? As long as there is a war, no Israeli election. Yeah, this is another thing, and I think it's instructive, and thank you, Hula Steph, because I feel as though there are plenty, in fact, maybe there is more of a chunk of protest in Israel over a lot of Israeli policy than there is anywhere else in the world. So I always feel it's a sad fact that rhetorically we say the Israelis, and there are a bunch of Israeli people who are going, hey, dude, we are not behind this. We're not behind the expansion. We're not behind the nature of the Netanyahu government toward opening fire on our perceived enemies. So the extremism that informs a lot of Israeli policy now, I'm so glad that Sarah referred to it. It represents a distinct minority in Israel. So thank you, Hula Steph, for pointing out, hey, the Israelis, when you hear that, it's not at all representative of a lot of what the country is feeling. Netanyahu's embattled and in bad shape, worse shape than Trump. Trump, has record low approval numbers. Netanyahu's are worse. So, and yet we find ourselves linked to a fate decided by two of these guys. I wanted to mention one other thing, which I will get to in just a second.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I wanted to mention something about Iran, and rather than have me mention it, I found a very smart guy that'll play it for you, cut 6 in a second. But I wanted to, before I get to that, mention our friends at Sweet 106 Bakery. And I guess they have a new offering coming, meaning there's something new that's being baked in their most magnificent kitchen, and we'll share it with you. But guys, this is a wonderful, wonderful place that you must order from. They are our partners now, new partners, sweet106bakery.com. If you're just listening on Spotify or on iHeartRadio, Sweet is S-U-I-T-E. Sweet 106 Bakery, because they started in a suite called Sweet 106. And sweet106bakery.com features this thing. The layered cupcake cakes are their own creation, and they cook everything, bake everything in small batches. So when you order it, they then make it, and then they get it out to you. And its freshness is ensured because of the way they package it. And you will delight in this. It is a religious experience.
Yes, it is.
Send it to Kim, send it to Tony, send it to Albert, and we tried it, Courtney and myself. Sweet106bakery.com. There's the Dubai chocolate.
I'm still thinking about it.
It's unreal. 3.5 cupcakes in this container that you can eat with a spoon if you want. It's like, the guilty pleasurist pleasure that you'll ever have. Sweet106bakery.com. Use our discount code and you'll get 15% off. Mark T is the discount code. Sweet106bakery.com. The Dubai chocolate is unbelievable. Third order going strong, says a northern tier. I love it. Again, use our discount code Mark T, 15% off, and you will be happy you did. Bravo, sweet106bakery.com.
I've told you it's never easy being in this business.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Over the weekend, I'm reading a bunch of stuff and I'm seeing a bunch of stuff, and I want to kind of do what I do here, where we collect a lot of this stuff and give you a sense of things. It's I think one of the things I can offer you is bits and pieces here and there that give you a sense of the way different people, different scholars, different experts, different generals in this case, are thinking about all of this. Sometimes it's very mainstream. Sometimes it's very counter the mainstream. But when we talk about Iran, I think it is worth noting that, and I'm sure you did see, many celebratory protests and demonstrations associated with the taking out of that supreme leader, Khamenei, or Khamenei, however you want to say it. And that reflects a real desire on the part of Iranians worldwide to see this country realize its potential being held down by this intensely strict, religious, despotic regime, a regime perfectly comfortable with killing tens of thousands of their own people. And so these celebratory demonstrations really reflect, again, that richness which we have seen in the Iranian diaspora. You know, in Southern California, there's a huge Iranian population, and they are a rich, vibrant part of so many communities. Here is a little bit of a word speaking about the secular Iran, the fact that this is not some country where this extreme religious movement is the thing that rules the day. In fact, this is a nation that would lean toward the West naturally if given the chance. Here you go.
You have written, and I thought this was pretty eloquent, Ayatollah Khamenei lived by death to America and death to Israel. He died by death from America and Israel. What does this mean for the Islamic Republic to have him gone?
He was the longest serving dictator in the world. For 4 decades, he reigned over Iran. For most Iranians, 3/4 of whom were born after the 1979 revolution, he was the only ruler they ever knew. And I think this is a society, I would describe it as perhaps the most secular society in the Muslim Middle East, perhaps the most pro-American society in the Middle East. And people, Iranians recognize they'll never fulfill their enormous potential as a nation so long as the ethos of their government is death to America and death to Israel. And so there's an enormous demand for a government which is perhaps not democratic, but puts national interests before revolutionary ideology.
General
So
Mackenzie.
that, I think, is instructive. You know, it's something to really keep in mind. Trump is saying he's weighing several off-ramps. I can go long if I want to and take over the whole thing, or end it in 2 days or 3 days and tell the Iranians, see you again in a few years if you start rebuilding your nuclear and missile programs. In any case, he said, it will take them several years to recover from this attack. This Operation Epic Fury, I think, in those remarks, it's reflected that he somehow thinks this is a surgical strike. It's like Venezuela. Again, he's looking for his mic drop moment here, and this is a far more complex situation than is reflected in those remarks.
Trump said today, yeah, we think we could be there for 4 to 5 weeks. It could be shorter. It could be a lot longer. What? You said nothing.
The president saying that the military operation took place in part due to failing negotiations held this past week, essentially, that were led by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. I'll remind you, I told you this at the beginning of the Trump regime and his ascendance to power, that Steve Witkoff, who at that time was just handling the sensitive negotiations between the Russians and the Ukrainians, he has no diplomatic experience. Steve Witkoff is a golfing buddy and a real estate billionaire. They are real estate pals. Literally. Look it up. I told you this, as I say, over a year ago. And Jared Kushner, again, I don't know where these people come from who have clear compromised pasts. You're talking about Jared Kushner, the guy who got $2 billion from the Saudis, who got this huge influx of money from the Emiratis. You're talking about Steve Witkoff, who in the negotiations with the Russians isn't talking to their diplomats. He's talking to their investment people. It's a true oligarchical back and forth going on. And so these guys are looking for business opportunities. This isn't a crew that's looking for a peaceful resolution with nothing for them. They would seem at some point to want to have a piece of the action. Again, there's so many parties at the table now, but the idea somehow that the Iranian talks broke down and the conversations with Witkoff and Kushner didn't yield any kind of serious concessions on the part of the Iranians, I think on one level, it just is, there's an absurdity to it. This is clearly an agenda-driven move. And so we live that agenda. The global shakedown.
And now,
says CC
your comments.
CC Ryder says the global shakedown. Thank you for the $10 super chat. The global shakedown template is in play with dictators aligning to steal natural resources, suspecting that Trump and MBS will apply mob tactics to demand oil proceeds. Venezuela 2.0. Policy is corruption. That's what I was saying, that there's something in it. Now, again, Venezuela, just in an instant, because you mentioned it, Venezuela, the Trump administration takes out the top people, and there is an administration in waiting, in effect, that they put in place. And the superstructure of politics in Venezuela is essentially unchanged. Now, that you could even say is a criticism of what happened. You didn't really change life for the people of Venezuela. You just changed the top dog. You grabbed him, brought him to the U.S., and now you're taking Venezuelan oil. You're taking Venezuelan oil reserve money, etc. This is not like that. Here you took out the top people, but there is no crew in waiting, and they've even said, we don't have a clear plan for succession. In fact, we're going to let the Iranian people decide. He's offered this kind of put down your arms and all will be forgiven to the Revolutionary Guard. That's not going to happen. Put down your arms to who? When I saw it, I thought, these guys, first of all, they're really highly trained soldiers. And secondly, they're the same guys who took out a bunch of demonstrators and protesters. I mean, when I say a bunch, I'm talking about thousands. I just don't know that it really echoes of Iraq, where there wasn't a plan for an after-action management of the situation that was going to be unfolding in Iraq. And Trump is now saying, and you can see it here, that there's a big wave, his words, quote, big wave yet to come in the war with Iran. I mean, and I'll say the rhetoric of this crowd that's now in power is all, we're warriors, we have a lethality. I played you the Hegseth stuff, and there's a big wave coming. We haven't even begun. The reality of some of this is that American firepower is being discharged in enough of a powerful way that you begin to diminish munitions. You can begin to diminish supplies. You also, not that it matters, but it matters, have begun an incredibly expensive endeavor as well. The CNN poll, 59% of Americans disapprove of the Iran strikes. Most think it's a long-term conflict. Yeah, I think it likely is a long-term conflict. I mean, see what I just said. There's no plan even for the days that immediately follow. And those planes that were shot down by accident by the Kuwaitis, and they're saying friendly fire. And thankfully, the American pilots and personnel in those planes safely parachuted out. Those planes are $100 million apiece. So this is an incredibly expensive and poorly conceived American effort without a coherent plan. Now, coherence is placed on it by talking to generals, retired general, this is a retired admiral, and they, I think, sincerely will give you the X's and O's of combat. But that doesn't mean that the goals and purposes associated with this are legitimate or can any way be laudable. Give me, just on that, cut 16. This is a general on the basic strategy at this point being employed by the Americans and Iranians. This is from yesterday. Go ahead.
Do you talk about the impact of the U.S. and Israeli strikes so far?
Yeah, so right now I think what we're seeing, George, is just kind of the elements of classic deterrence, right? We've imposed cost onto the adversary. We've denied the adversary benefit from their attacks, and then we're seeing the president go out with the messaging right now. But that's not to say that the Iranians didn't get a vote in this. We've seen, you heard Ian talk about the different strikes that have come back now into Israel as well, the other Gulf neighbors. So we've got to continue to target Iran. Right now, I'm sure last night we did a lot of battle damage assessment about how well we did on those targets, re-prosecute those targets. You heard CENTCOM declare air supremacy right now, so now our pilots can go in and strike those targets further. But we also, on our side, have to do our own assessments. Let's not be naive. We've expended a lot of interceptors. Iranian missiles have impacted in and around the Gulf region, so we've got to take a look at how our equipment has performed. We've got to go ahead and do missile reloads, all those kind of things that help prepare us for however long this conflict may continue on.
President Trump told CBS News last night that he was surprised that the Iran's retaliation wasn't more significant. Are you?
I think it's a pretty significant response to hundreds and hundreds of missiles that have come through. Now we'll see how it goes on here in the days coming now that we've established air supremacy.
Yeah, I think that is, in the statement from Trump that I'm surprised they didn't hit us back harder. It's the kind of naivete, if it's true, of someone who doesn't really read a presidential briefing anyway, Hegseth is defending the attack on Iran as, quote, our retribution for years-long Iranian roles in sponsoring terrorism. He declined to say how long the operation would last or rule out the potential of sending U.S. troops on the ground. Yes, I said it. Hegseth will not rule out the potential of sending U.S. troops to Iran. Quote, we didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. Their war on Americans has become our retribution against their Ayatollah and his death cult. Hegseth loves to smack talk. He loves to be the frat boy who got the big job. And Donald Trump is saying that with a large number of Iranians killed, it's tough to say who will lead those who are going to come back into Iran or rise in Iran in leadership roles. This is all coexisting with the decision from Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump to insist that, and I gave you the story last week, and I alluded to it I guess it was maybe an hour ago. I alluded to the fact that the AI company, it's Anthropic is what it's called, is the company that was being leaned on by the Pentagon and by Pete Hegseth to change its regulations and rules that prevent the Pentagon from doing two things: surveilling Americans through the use of the AI programs at Anthropic, and B, from creating an AI capability and capacity that would involve firing weapons without a human being involved. In other words, the AI assesses a situation and you end up with the firing of defensive or offensive weapons. Anthropic was a hard no on that. And in back and forth with Pete Hegseth, the Anthropic people were anxious to keep their government contracts, a lot of money. I mean, they are the AI crew, and apparently their system is better than any other. Claude, it's called. Like, at least as a retail user, you can use Claude. But the Pentagon was equally intractable on their demands. No, we want you to give us the capacity to have your AI allow us, if we want, the power to assess and to actually fire weapons, control weapons without a human being involved. Here is what, yeah, sorry.
And surveil the American public with their AI device, yeah.
Right, yeah, as I was saying before, and they want that capacity as well. The CEO of Anthropic actually sat down for a lengthy interview, and I thought he was, I give them mad respect for pushing back on the U.S. government, which could literally destroy their company now because they won't play ball. Go ahead, Tony.
You know, Anthropic actually has been the most lean forward of all the AI companies in working with the U.S. government and working with the U.S. military. We were the first company to, put our models on the classified cloud. We were the first company to make custom models for national security purposes. We're deployed across the intelligence community and the military for applications like cyber, combat support operations, various things like this. And, you know, the reason we've done this is, you know, I believe that we have to defend our country. I believe we have to defend our country from autocratic adversaries like China and like Russia. And so we've been very, you know, we've been very lean forward. We have a substantial, you know, public sector team. But you know, I have always believed that, you know, as we defend ourselves against our autocratic adversaries, we have to do so in ways that defend our democratic values and preserve our democratic values. And so we have said to the Department of War that we are okay with all use cases, basically 98 or 99% of the use cases they want to do, except for two that we're concerned about. One is domestic mass surveillance. There, we're worried that, you know, things may become possible with AI that weren't possible before. An example of this is something like taking data collected by private firms, having it bought by the government, and analyzing it en masse via AI. That actually isn't illegal. It was just never useful before the era of AI. So there's this way in which domestic mass surveillance is getting ahead of the law. The technology is advancing so fast that it's out of step with the law. That's case number one. Case number two is fully autonomous weapons. This is not the partially autonomous weapons that are used in Ukraine or you know, could potentially be used in Taiwan today. This is the idea of making weapons that fire without any human involvement. Now, even those, I think that, you know, our adversaries may at some point have them, so perhaps, you know, they may at some point be needed for the defense of democracy, but we have some concerns about them. First, the AI systems of today are nowhere near reliable enough to make fully autonomous weapons. You know, anyone who's worked with AI models understands that there's a basic unpredictability to them that in a purely technical way we have not solved. And there's an oversight question too. If you have a large army of drones or robots that can operate without any human oversight, where there aren't human soldiers to make the decisions about who to target, who to shoot at, that presents concerns. And we need to have a conversation about how that's overseen. And we haven't had that conversation yet. And so we feel strongly that, you know, for you know.
How good is that guy? I mean,
Really
he's
good.
the CEO.
And you
Dario
know who-
Modi should just relocate Anthropic overseas, says Randy. Yeah, but go ahead, finish out his comment. Sure, thank you.
Those two use cases should not be allowed.
Yeah, surveilling Americans and the fully autonomous weapons that the Pentagon wants the capacity to employ, they should not be permitted. And it's costing them all of government contracts. In fact, and this is a very Trumpian thing that's happening, the government is going to go after them, claiming that they are a national security risk, and they are going to try to prevent them from doing business, in effect, with any company that has any interaction with the U.S. government. I mean, they can really ruin them. And it looks like they're going to ruin them. I mean, or at least try to. So you end up with, what's the other AI company, Tony or Kim?
It's Sam Altman with OpenAI.
OpenAI, thank you.
Stepped right in when Anthropic said, no, this is a bridge too far. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, steps right in, takes those government contracts and says, well, you know, we have the same red lines in the sand. No, they don't, or they wouldn't have signed the contract.
That's exactly right.
Kim, how are you?
That's exactly right. And so, I mean, this is scary. I mean, you know, how many of you,
they're going to blow up all of us. That's it.
How many of you of any age have seen at least 3 movies in which AI took over and, oh, sorry, we can't undo it now. AI's taking over. How many Star Trek episodes? How many sci-fi things? War Games was literally a movie about how the Pentagon was involved in war game stuff that then became real because other countries in this war games script, they had other countries seeing what the U.S. was doing and then launching, or maybe it was the U.S. that saw other countries and misunderstood it. I forget, but because there are so many of these things. There is a scene from War Games. I mean, that is a tried and true plot point. It's almost cliche. You know, the machines take over and end the world. Now, you always hear about machines are going to take over and kill us all as though they're going to bust through the front door and shoot you. No, no, no. This is the way it happens. Exactly the way that Hegseth and his incompetent pals are going to open the door and actually insist upon AI permitting. Crazy. Shall we play a game? Thank you. I think in war games, Matthew Broderick, wasn't it? He hacks into the Pentagon system.
Mm-hmm.
And he creates. Isn't that what happened, Tony?
Movie.
Yeah.
But you would think we would have learned the lesson from the movies in the 80s. But no, instead, we're marching straight toward our doom.
It's pretty crazy. It really is. So
And now, your comments.
Thanks, everybody who has thrown us some comments today. There's Matthew Broderick hacking into the Defense Department system. ChatGPT, OpenAI won't answer some things that are bad toward this regime. Has for a while now sort of played ball, says you matter. Thank you. You matter, you do. Thank you. Appreciate the...
So I guess if we're going to use AI, don't use OpenAI, because you know what you're supporting when you use OpenAI.
That's what Courtney's view is. She said, I don't want nothing on OpenAI anymore.
Nope. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So
there's a new edict in my home like every few hours, though. You know, I don't want to go to don't use these people anymore. Don't use this girl because they have ties to.
I love it. Vote with your wallet. I mean, what other power do we have other than, you know, at least take a stand where you can take a stand?
I'm late, says John Watson. YouTube makes me watch Trump campaign commercials before the show starts.
What?
Well, they're trying to convert you.
They're playing to the wrong audience here.
Thank you to the Trump campaign for buying some time on. They don't buy this show.
I stand corrected.
They buy across the board on YouTube. Altman said before he went in after Anthropic was dropped, he supported Anthropic's position, but then made a deal with the government. Wow, Randy, go, and then, oh, you're gone. Okay, well, you did go. I'm going to take the spot that you used to have. Wow.
Scoop in and take your money? Absolutely.
Skynet and Hal. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Hal. The, what was it? The Hal 2.
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
Oh, that's it. The, was it Hal 2000 computer, 3000 computer? 2000.
Everything is going extremely well.
Yeah, that was it. That's right. Hal. The HAL. No, I think it was the HL 9000 computer. I'm going 9,000, Tony. Look it up. I think
you're
it was
right,
the
you're
HL.
Right. It's 9,000. 2000
I'm
is the
right.
movie.
God damn
Wow.
it. Once in a while, pay attention to your elders. My goodness. I'm telling you.
Everything is going extremely well.
All right. MAGA is a cult, and they are always dangerous, says Brethren Lee. Thank you, Brethren Lee. Is Ukraine jealous that Iran stole their thunder, says Richard Delamater. Don't the billionaires understand that when all of the humans are gone, they won't be able to keep making money? I think they have a bizarre, twisted, perverse notion of survivability of all of this stuff. And it's just that. It's perverse.
And now, your comments.
Okay, I'll read a couple more and then we got to go. We invaded Venezuela the week that Congress demanded the Epstein files, which we didn't get. We invaded Iran the day after the Clintons testified under oath, causing people to demand Trump do the same. Yeah, I mean, that's the... Golf, thank you for that. That's the parallel that's being drawn. I mean, it sounded to me like Sarah Kendzior, who's pretty sharp on this stuff, didn't really feel that it was that cause and effect. But maybe. She saw that there was a linkage, but... Murphy says, so many Iranians and Iranian Americans are celebrating the death of the Ayatollah, but it doesn't change the illegality and chaos of the strikes and the lies used to justify them. Both can be true. Yeah, I mean, I think no one is in a position defending the old Ayatollah. This guy was awful. But it is true that what's being used to justify, and then the after effects, the ripple effect is what's going on, you know. Chris Murphy, cut 8. Play me some of that. That just speaks to a little of what Murphy's talking about. This is Murphy and Murphy. Senator Chris Murphy talking about just what Murphy Rowan was speaking of. legality.
Has ever overcome a presidential veto. Why do you think you need to take one?
Well, nobody in this country is asking for war with Iran. Just like months ago, no one in this country was asking for war with Venezuela. This president is intentionally tanking our economy. He's the most corrupt president in the history of our nation. And Americans want him to focus on the crises here at home. Instead, he is busy getting us involved in quagmires overseas that already are becoming deadly to American soldiers. This is a disaster. It is illegal. And the president is obligated under the Constitution to come to Congress and ask for an authorization of military force. He wouldn't get that authorization if he asked for it. Congress wouldn't vote to give him the permission to do it, but he's obligated to come to Congress.
The administration would argue Venezuela was a limited military operation. They're not explaining to the public yet, beyond that Twitter video, exactly what the plan is here. But the president has tweeted in a way describing this as an open-ended conflict until peace is achieved. You're using the term war. You do consider this to be a war.
Oh, of course. We are engaged in regular, ongoing military strikes that has already killed American soldiers with the goal of regime change. If that is not war, what is? Mm-hmm. Now, the president has said that the goal is regime change, and the goal is to eliminate Iran's missile program and their nuclear program. He is not going to succeed in either of those endeavors. His intelligence agencies have already told him that the most likely outcome is that hardline members of the IRGC replace the current leadership. So we're not going to get a democracy. We're going to get an even worse Iranian leadership. We already know that you can't bomb their nuclear program out of existence. He told us last year that he'd obliterated the program. And then apparently over the course of the last year, they've gotten back to within a week. So we're going to have Americans dying. And the end result is going to be hardline leadership continues in Iran and we don't get rid of their nuclear program. That's a moral and strategic disaster for the country.
Well, and that is a lose-lose, and Murphy knows a lot, and that's Senator Chris Murphy. He speaks it bluntly. Israel launches a new attack on Tehran and Beirut as Iran closes the critical Strait of Hormuz. And this is what I was talking about in the first hour, that the pressure that is kept on the Strait of Hormuz will affect oil prices. It'll affect the flow of oil to, 20% of the oil goes through, and natural gas goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So just the threat is hugely, colossally important from the standpoint of leverage. And the reason I was mentioning it to start is that doesn't cost them anything. You understand, just the idea that you have raised the price of insurance on these tankers to the point that no one can pay what they need to pay to go through there because there's a legitimate threat that those tankers could be taken out. Just that threat has created a logjam and a complete impassability in the strait. And as a result, you have what's being talked about, which is a spiking of oil prices, and this will have massive effects internationally. And that doesn't cost Iran much. So as we're talking about missiles and all of these great American weapon systems, the Iranians can play this game and drag it out. This is a grappling match. Trump set up World War III, says Mr. Jungle Bear. China and Russia and Iran against us and Israel. It's pretty gross. How are those egg prices? LOL, says Oregon Valley Girl. Yeah. Big shout out to all of you who left
big shout out
comments. Already filled my tank yesterday, says Brad Forward. S is going to get real soon. Yeah, I mean, I think oil prices are going to go way up and your price at the pump is going to go way up. Exactly right. Wondering what the money angle is. I think there are a lot of money angles, as detailed in part by Sarah, but I would suggest the money angle. I mean, I know you're kind of asking it. I think you're asking it sort of rhetorically, but as I said, I think in a post over the weekend, don't lose the Saudi, Emirati, and Israeli connection to this. It's more at the table than just Israel. Many moneyed interests are associated. The Qataris. Look at Trump's money The Qatari jet, the Emirati infusion of billions of dollars, and the Saudi infusion of billions of dollars into everything from Kushner funds to Trump meme coins, etc. And the Qatari jet's another example, right? And I think you can not tell me that there isn't a quid pro quo there. So when MBS, as we told you, the Saudis urged Trump to strike this Iranian leadership now and do it this way, I think, they got what they paid for, literally. Trump Hotel Tehran, says CC Ryder with a $2 super chat. Yeah. This is real damage and real prices being paid. Thanks, says Hula Steph. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, thank you, Hula Steph, for
big shout out,
pointing things out that are a bit more nuanced, I think, than a lot of people give them credit for being. Trump needs to talk to Kim about how to hold a proper party. Dude has absolutely no plan for what to do after the weekend smoke show. Hashtag clown in chief. Yeah, he didn't like Luis is saying that party that he was having at Mar-a-Lago. He felt it was lacking something, Kim. He should talk to you about the after party. You know how to throw an after party.
Yeah, keep the crowd entertained, right?
Can we refer to the Mideast buffoon as Net? The Greg Deckelman says, can we refer to the Mideast buffoon as Net the Yahoo? What is that, Tony? You speak, Greg Deckelman.
Instead of Netanyahu, right?
Oh, Net the Yahoo. I get it.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
Awarding point.
Kim, how are you?
Very well done. Thank you, Greg. I got it. I needed help to get it because I'm, diminished that way. Stardust Memories says, thank you, Mark Thompson and guests. You are fearless. Thank you.
Big shout out.
Thank you for the super chat. $10. I'm sure the action is taken over the weekend, says Luis, will make all Iranians love us. Ted Cruz is an idiot, but heard Donald Trump may put bearded lady Cruz on SCOTUS. Oh, you think that Ted Cruz is working for the SCOTUS appointment? What a great payoff that would be.
Nightmare.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it'd be more nightmarish than what we're already living through. Thanks, Luis, for that.
Big shout out.
I don't know if you've already had this one or not.
Do not believe the MAGA messaging, says CC Ryder. Trump has a back-end agenda to enrich himself while also facilitating right-wing religious objectives of eliminating Middle East threats to Israel. Quote, sell the attack as a threat. Well, clearly they're selling the attack as a threat. I mean, they are trying to sell the imminent threat of nuclear weapons when that seemed to be bankrupt of any kind of substance. They go right to, well, these long-range missiles, and then you heard Trump sort of improv this long-range missiles that it could eventually reach this country. I mean, the sort of absurdity of it all became clear as they were sort of grasping, and then they go for the protest. What a brutal leadership structure was existing in Iran prior. Look how many thousands of people were killed. I mean, they're jumping around from thing to thing. Why did you have to do this now without an imminent threat? So that's why they go to the imminent threat thing, and yet called out almost immediately, no one can really speak to an imminent threat. What was let me leave you with this just on that. Cut 4. Cut 4 is this Congresswoman, Anna Paulina Luna, and she kind of jumps all over the place as she tries to suggest that there was an imminent threat. Go ahead, Tony. No? No audio, pal?
Hear her. Yeah.
Well, anyway, it becomes harder and harder. She's on thin ice as she tries to defend it. And Will Knight says Republicans have been spearheading interventionist coups and regime changes across the globe with every single Republican administration since the last 125 years across Latin America, Africa, and Asia, and the Middle East. That is true, by the way. If you go back and you want to just look at the different ways in which, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., I mean, it's really true. I guess you could argue Vietnam. I mean, and this might speak to kind of where we are with, and I know this is part of a bigger thing, capitalism needs a war, et cetera. But, I mean, God, I've read so many books on this stuff, but the famous one is it the Butler book on, anyway, somebody in the chat will tell me. But anyway, the idea somehow that I think Vietnam, you could say, and you could maybe place many of these conflicts, Afghanistan as well, at the feet of both parties. But it does appear that these Republicans have a real nose for conflict, and this is a scary situation that we find ourselves in.
3 Lives of a Warrior?
No, it's...
No. I'm trying.
Yeah, I don't know. They're all over the... I'll find it. I want to say...
It's all right.
Find something. I'll find the... It's a great way to end the show as I'm just racking my already addled mind for...
JM says this is going to cost us trillions.
It will. It will. Yeah.
Smedley Butler's essay?
Smedley Butler, exactly. Thank you. That was it. He did the essay. He was a general, and he did the definitive essay on this, I believe. All right. Well,
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Johnson Show. Bye-bye.
I don't know, guys. We'll be here tomorrow with David.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
The brilliant David K. Johnson tomorrow and more. Thank you, everybody. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.